Hi, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us at the Chicago Southland International Film Festival's Q&A in relation to the anthology of films that they've called The Human Struggle. So we're all joining together in this contemplation of the human struggle through our work. Very serious stuff. We have four of the filmmakers with us today, representing Craig Mooneyham is representing Salting the Fly, which he co-directed with Jacob Reynolds. Tijuana Ricks, Gwydion Suleiman is representing All Souls for us, directed by Tijuana Ricks. Frank Tovar is representing Huckleberry Finn, A Close Place, and Francis Wilkerson is representing Red. I've looked closely at each of your films and maybe want to get a little bit granular on them, but given that we have only a half hour, we'll probably kind of just be a little bit more nuanced in the way that we do that. I'm going to start with Craig. So Craig, you've got a film that maybe you, just for the sake of everyone on the panel who hasn't yet had the chance to see your film, maybe tell us a little bit about
it. Sure, it's a story of two brothers, teenage brothers, the younger of whom is autistic, who have been, I assume we're not going to, no spoiler alerts, right?
Yeah, just kind of a spoilers.
Okay, sure. Yeah. I'm terrible at synopsizing this. I'm reading it, so I'll do my best. But anyway, so two brothers, they're the younger of whom is autistic. They're in a very precarious plight, and they're trying to basically communicate with each other some very deep and meaningful messages between each other before their time runs out.
Lovely, thank you. You've got a film that has a secret planted from the very beginning, and it reveals it in a really effective way. The film is also at once kind of surface and symbol. Could you talk to us a little bit about that? You mentioned in the director's notes the transcendental power of allegory.
Yeah. So the idea, so part of the inspiration for it, and that was sort of built into the story, appearing in my mind. That's the way I like to kind of think of stories. They appear, then they sort of flesh out as you come to know your characters. Part of the allegory, or the inspiration for allegory, came from a documentary about an autistic boy called Life Animated. And I don't know how much you all know about autism, but one of the biggest factors is the communication, the challenge with communicating, and especially communicating very deep emotional ideas. And so that might lead one to believe that those with autism don't comprehend and don't feel deep emotional concepts, but they do. It's just a matter of them communicating them. And in this documentary, Life Animated, a little boy overcame that challenge by using Disney stories to convey what he was feeling and what his older brother was feeling, what his family was feeling. And his family understood, oh my gosh, he's using this to communicate very deeply emotional, complex ideas. And so I think that was kind of under the surface of the character of Danny in my film Salting the Fly, and how he's trying to convey something to his brother, but he's using an allegory. He's using an allegory of this Saint Germain, right. In the Catholic pantheon of saints.
Yeah, thank you. It had a feeling for me in places of I've seen Life Animated, great doc. But also reminded me a bit of a kind of a Rain Man in miniature. Did that film come to mind at all? Yeah.
Yeah, it was there a little bit. There's a lot of other allegory, I'd say implicit and explicit. And implicit is just the names of the characters. You have David, so it's kind of pulling from a lot of biblical themes and motifs. You have David, who was the savior of Israel, who killed the giant Goliath, and that has relevance to the film without giving anything away. And you have Danny, so like Daniel in the lion's den, he was saved from the lion, from being attacked, from being eaten and destroyed. And so you have these different, just the character names kind of speaks to their character and what they carry out throughout the story. And just with different things like the colors and what have you. You have David is sort of the savior. He has the like the scarlet coloring, or a crimson, I guess you'd say, the color of his clothes. And so I think there's just some sort of implicit things in there. The salting of the fly. I don't know how many people know, but that's an actual thing you can do. You can drown a fly. You don't really kill it, but I guess it fills up with water and becomes immobile. And then you pour salt on it, and after a while it revives. That salt pulls all the water out of it, and it revives, and it looks like you resurrected a fly. So there's allegory there in that as well.
Yeah, particularly beautiful in the use of the fly there. Let's go to, thank you, to Gwydion Sullivan. Gwydion, I was struck particularly by the sepulchral light around many of your characters in this film. It's all about faith, and I'm sure that was deliberate on Tio Wanarix's part. There's a sermon at the core that I found incredibly powerful, and a sermon too at the end that kind of contradicted it. The film confronts atheism and faith. Can you talk a little bit around what the intentions were?
Yeah, so, we live in a world that's increasingly polarized. The two fastest growing religious segments in the United States are the non-believers and the evangelical megachurches. And yet at the same time, 45% of Americans are now practicing a different religion than the one they were raised in. So we're still a country of seekers and searchers and people who want to live in this kind of gray middle in conversation between faith and disbelief and doubt and certainty on the one hand and inquisition and inquisitiveness on the other hand. So we wanted to create a piece of art that showed believers and non-believers reckoning with one another and trying to cross their differences and live in that muddy middle. So that's really what the film is about. It's not an atheist film. It's not a believer's film. At the core is an atheist Episcopal rector who's living a lie, basically trying to hide and stay in the closet, keep his beliefs in the closet, because if he is found out, he'll lose everything, his job, the only job he's trained for, his entire network, his community, his calling. And this is a man who still cares about people, though he's in a sort of disgruntled and angry place when we meet him. So yeah, it's very intentional. We're trying to change the conversation, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Lovely work and lovely performances. Thank you. I'm going to go to Frank Tovar now. Frank, talk to us a little bit about Huckleberry Finn, A Close Place. Frank, for the record, is someone who wrestles with American literature in his work, in his films. This is the third, Frank, that you've done this with. You were
Yes.
Dreiser before, and then talk a little bit around that and your intentions with this film.
Oh yes. I first, of course, fell in love with Huckleberry Finn as a child, after an automobile accident that left me bedridden for a better part of my 8th year. Developed my love of books at that time, reading and watching movies. But it wasn't until I got to university that I really got to, I think, not appreciate, but better appreciate, I think, the power of Huckleberry Finn. And of course, it was I had an understanding of its power as a child, but really studying it at university was the first time that I started to consider why it was so powerful to me at that time, why it was still so resonant in, at that time, 2012, 2013. Studying it under Walter Van Michels at UIC. I was an English major, and that was the book that I've been wanting to do for a number of years. And the plan was to do it as a feature. This was sort of a trial run, and then the pandemic disrupted that. But in general, about my interest in English literature, it's something that I've been.
Twain himself talked about, his relationship with his father, about how he didn't know much when he was growing up, and then when he became older, his father suddenly acquired some wisdom. So you take liberties with American literature, and in an effort, I think, to discover the universality of it, to transpose it to present experiences, and sort of test it that way. Can you talk a little around that?
Oh, sure. Well, to the extent that that certain books are universal, and certain works of literature are universal. I think in a strange way, they're universal in their particularity. The particularity of a poor working class white boy, outcast, and finding a deep friendship with an escaped slave. That's something very particular, but it speaks to, I think, the struggles that for freedom that we're still witnessing, and in this period in particular. The sad thing is that as the years have gone on since 2013, when I first started to think about adapting this book, it's the adaptation to the contemporary has been, for lack of a better word, less ridiculous. It's less ridiculous to imagine this scenario today.
Speaking more specifically, your Jim now is this undocumented immigrant.
Yes, that's right.
Right, right. Can you talk a little bit around the casting and the planning of that character?
Oh, sure. So I was looking for a Somali actor. So the plan was, it was in response to the travel ban, the anti-Muslim travel ban, and my, how obscene that was, and how we were all disgusted by that and outraged by that. And so it was written for the character was written as a Somali. In the casting process, I found the best actor was actually an actor from Cameroon. So there was a slight adjustment there, but in the process of making a movie, you discover things like that, and you shift and adapt, and I think Will Wamba is extraordinary in the movie, and he had a deep personal attachment to the material, and yeah, it was really extraordinary to meet this man, and to have him contribute certain lines of dialogue in the filming, and he was just great.
He does. He owns the part, most definitely, and beautifully shot on the whole.
Stephen Wester.
Pardon me?
Stephen Wester, the cinematographer.
Yeah, yeah. And just the challenge of filming on the river as you did, really remarkable accomplishment. Thank you. Francis Wilkerson, let's talk a bit about Red, a really empathetic depiction of a man of constant sorrow. It seemed to me who was trapped in the hell of having to work as a clown. Can you talk a little around your intent then? I just laughed out loud, and I couldn't, at that really dark movie, and I get to the end, and there's this little credit that says, no balloon animals were hurt in the making of this movie, which I just thought was delightful. Can you talk a little bit around your intent?
So with Red, I really wanted to show, basically all of us are everyone is dealing with some type of emotional pain, whether that's pain from childhood or the pain that Red had to go through. And a lot of times with that pain, you're basically pushing it away, right? You're pushing it away, or you're holding it inside. And when you deal with that pain, when you release on that pain, on the other side of that pain is freedom. So in Red's case, he's projecting. So either you project and you make other people's lives miserable, or you internalize it and you make your own life miserable, either through illness or depression or whatever. And so I really wanted to depict that. And I felt that comedy was the best way to kind of take people on this roller coaster ride of drama comedy, take them on this roller coaster ride so that they could actually feel the emotions. I really wanted the audience to feel the emotions of what Red was going through. And I also wanted the audience to empathize. So when people are going through things, to kind of see their side of things and kind of bring us closer together as humans, to see that we are more alike than we are different, that we are dealing with similar pains, and that's what kind of drives us all. And when you see someone acting irrationally or they're more than likely just in deep pain, and maybe that can actually cause some empathy from someone else's from someone else seeing that. So it was really just on the other side of dealing with your emotional pain is freedom. And that's really the impetus for making Red.
Well said. Thank you. It's apparent from this conversation that we're all appropriately connected in having this conversation, that the threads of our stories intertwine in the way that they kind of explore the soul, and that struggle to just get by, right? So I'm going to ask a couple of generic questions. Something went wrong, in the making of your film. Always does. This is independent film. We are working with, if not nano budgets. We're working with very, very low budgets, and something went the hell wrong along the way. So what stands out in your memory, in brief, and how did you attend to it? Well, let's start with Frank, because you talked about having to shift with casting.
Oh yes, well, I would say that the biggest setback we had was on day one. We lost our boat, which was our all-purpose boat, camera boat, transportation boat, to an island on which we were shooting. So that also meant we lost our night shoot. So that night, I mean, we could have gone on shooting, but I decided to wrap early instead of risking injury to anyone. But so I really had to sort of plan day two and to incorporate making night scenes, day scenes, but it really resulted in, I think, the happiest shooting day of my life, which was the second day of shooting on this film, which it resulted. These are the happy accidents that we all depend on, and it forces us to rise to the challenge and to discover new things and as opposed to just shooting a storyboard,
Exactly. You kind of stole my segue, because I think that we go from these horrible moments, and I've had that kind of a first day too on a couple of occasions, and then something serendipitous happens as a consequence. Sometimes there's a direct connection, or sometimes there's something that's serendipitous that happens in a completely independent way. But anybody else want to share a horror story that may have turned out good or stayed bad?
Well, I know for Red, the shot in the alley. Well, when you shoot in Illinois, you just never know what weather you're going to get, especially in the spring. So it was really nice for the 3 days of shooting, and then the last day of shooting, it was like freezing and snowing. And so, and that's like, well, wow, no other day was it snowing, and it looks like it's spring, and now it's snowing. It's going to confuse people, but so it was a challenge in keeping people warm, because we had to I had a little child on the set. I mean, and it changed suddenly. It wasn't like we knew it was going to be cold. It was just like, it was warm and now it's cold. And so to have to adapt and make sure my actors are safe and they're warm, and that was a challenge. And then it snowed, but it actually ended up as a really nice serendipitous thing in the end, to have the flakes falling right when he's walking away. It really did actually, it was a really nice addition to the film. So when those kind of things happen, I always embrace them, because I always know that they're going to bring something wonderful and positive to the film. So I try to embrace crazy when it happens.
Yeah, that was a lovely and memorable shot. And this is Illinois, and yeah, we got to roll with it, right?
We had a shoot lined up. The needle we had to thread was aligning the availability of our lead actor, Michael Potts, who's fairly regularly working on Broadway and in Hollywood, and the Episcopal church we were shooting in, which had services on Sundays. And we had our shoot, an 8-day shoot set, and Spike Lee kept him in Hollywood for 3 more days than he thought he was gonna. So we literally had to reschedule the shoot for many, many months later.
Damn, Spike Lee. I'm sorry.
We came second to Spike Lee, which is, that's fine. So we ended up changing directors in that 9-month period, and I'm sure it would have worked out fine with our original director, but Tijuana was amazing, truly amazing. So it was a great gift to us at the end of the day. And in our new slot, we had to steer around Easter, which was a little trickier with the church than it would have been originally, but they made it work. We made it work. And we got the right people behind the camera and in front of the camera.
Right. And in the case of you three, we have multiple locations and interiors, exteriors that you need to deal with. In Craig's case, you had, a confined space for the most part. There's one exterior at the end, but I'm sure something still went wrong, right? Reassure us. Or did it all go perfectly?
You know what? not really anything major. This is
Good,
the first
good.
film I've done with a decent budget, and it was just, we originally intended to cast an actual autistic actor for the role of Danny, but that just didn't pan out. And but you know, you want to talk about silver linings. We had a really great actor. We had a consultant working with him to make sure that he was accurately accurately and respectfully portraying an individual with autism. So nothing major that I could say, just little stuff that everybody runs into.
Right.
But
right.
that was probably the biggest thing.
Yeah, yeah. That's really wonderful that you paid attention to that detail, that important, that core detail. All right, thank you. What else can we talk about here? I guess what I want to ask all of you is, what is it about this film personally that made you want to make it? I always feel that as filmmakers, we kind of have a chip on our shoulders, and there's something that we're really we're angry about, that we need to communicate through our work, and it's what motivates us and obsesses us to go through this incredibly long process. In Frank's case, I know, Frank, that you adopted your mother's surname to tell your story. Could we start with you maybe, and why you made that decision?
Oh, sure. Well, to answer the last question about why I made that decision to adopt my mother's surname, Tovar, I really didn't know too many of the Weinerts, just a couple. The Tovars are really the ones who raised me and whom I knew and who informed who I am. So I thought it was time. And also in the case of my mother, she is an immigrant from Cuba, and I was thinking about how much more compassionate she was treated as someone who was her and her family, my grandfather and my grandmother, and my mother's sisters, how they were welcomed into the country, and I'm a beneficiary of a more compassionate immigration policy. So I'm outraged to think of who is being denied the basic right. I mean, the United States was supposed to be, as Tom Paine said, the asylum for mankind, and it's turned into the land of concentration camps. So
yeah, that's motivation plenty. Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Craig.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that fed into this. I have a nephew who is on the autism spectrum, so that fed into the inspiration for this film. There wasn't anything negative I was really trying, or anger that I was trying to get out so much as, I mean, I think we all have this ideal in our minds of actual selfless love. A lot of times we say that, unconditional love, selfless love, but so much of what we call really has some type of conditions to it, what we call unconditional love. I think in this story, just seeing this relationship between these brothers, one that would go to the greatest lengths you could imagine for loving his brother and taking care of his brother and standing up for someone who was, you might say, weaker and couldn't stand up for himself. So to me, I think it was that, really trying to capture that ideal image of the kind of the savior, if you will, the savior motif, but capturing it in a story that is real, and I hope came across as feeling real and would touch, and would touch the audience and be moving. So I think it was that, just trying to convey that's kind of the heart of really this story, or how these brothers able to connect, and you see this unconditional and selfless love between the two of them.
Beautifully said. Thank you. Yeah. Francis.
I think for me, it's really just the amount of suffering that humanity has to go through when we are here, and the immense amount of lack of empathy that a lot of us have for each other, and really kind of like me, you're not doing this for me, and what am I getting out of it kind of mentality. I just have a really strong desire to see humanity come together, and instead of being so separated either by race or gender or sexual orientation, when we are all really struggling with the same things. And if we were compassionate with each other, it really could make our time here a lot easier. We could support each other. But there's just so much division, and that was really a drive for me to make Red, is just, can we see ourselves in someone else? And if we do, will that allow us to be more empathetic? And that's really what I wanted to explore.
Wonderfully said. Thank you. Gideon.
I was really moved by a nonprofit I learned about called the Clergy Project. It's a network, very anonymous, very discreet network of former clergy members who help other clergy members transition when they come to terms with their loss of faith or their lack of faith. You know, as you can imagine, it's an incredibly difficult thing. There's these huge stories of people when they come to accept this fact about themselves that they don't believe anymore, they lose everything. Imagine, you know, how stressful it is to lose your job. It's not just a job, it's your entire career. You can never do the career again. And everyone you know in your social network is a part of that job. You don't have friends who are outside of your job. Your job connects you with others. And then you lose sometimes your marriage on top of that. So you're instantly, when you just, you know, reveal this truth about yourself, your entire life changes. And it's, you know, leads to, you know, deep depression and suicide and isolation. And I was really moved about that. You know, it struck me as just a terribly painful thing. So I wanted to kind of restore the humanity of people who are struggling with that, and in that way, you know, show them in all their complexity and their goodness, even in a moment of doubt. That was what mattered to me.
Right, right. So I had to kind of rephrase my question. I talked about the impetus of anger, and really it's about the destination, the intent, and that is to create a kind of a greater sense of community and empathy through all of your work, I think. Thank you. I have one more question to wind down with, and that is to sort of say, well, what have you learned from this particular experience, and how is it going to inform what you do next? We'll start with you, Frances, if you don't mind.
Yeah, Red was a student film, and so it was done in a semester. So it was like a 12-week challenge, really, to go from pre-production to first cut. And I learned that you can make a film in that short period of time from beginning to end. But it also gave me confidence as a filmmaker, you know, being a newer filmmaker, that, wow, I did it. You know, I can do it. Imagine if I had 6 months or 3 months, you know, or more than 3 months, like I had 6 months or a year, you know, to really plan it. It really gave me confidence. So that I am so grateful to this movie for giving me that kind of awareness about what I can and cannot do regarding filmmaking. So that was what it gave me.
Cool. Thank you. Craig.
I had done 5 short films prior to this one, and they were all amateur, you know, so it's kind of my film school, is OJT. And I really began to doubt myself as a filmmaker, just my ability, because I was always, you know, you're always in the editing room going, we missed this shot, or we didn't get this, or this doesn't look like the way I wanted it. But this one, having a little bit of budget, a decent budget, and working with all professional crew, it was a world of difference. And so I think, if anything, I came away realizing working with professionals and having a budget really allows a filmmaker to fully explore the realm of writer and director, more director than writer, but really explore that space of director, and having that full support of professionals who you can rely on. I mean, many times I had the producer, I would go to get something or go get somebody. She'd say, whoa, what are you doing? I'm like, well, I need to go tell somebody. I said, no, you don't do that. You tell somebody. We will get that for you. So just having that support made a huge world of difference, where I wasn't having to run all around and wear many hats. I could just sit and focus on the actors, the script, the next shot, and that made a huge world of difference. So I think how that's going to, you know, help me going forward is I have confidence now to try to move into the next space of potentially working on a feature.
Great. Yeah. So both of you then have had an experience of increased confidence as a consequence of these experiences, and maybe looking ahead, I guess, to feature stories. Let's go first around to Gideon.
You know, one of the things I'm really proudest about All Souls is that team of people that we had on the project. And I really learned, and will never forget this lesson. We, so many creative industries are too white and too male. And we just decided from the beginning that we would make sure that wasn't true on All Souls. And at the end of the day, 75% of the people who worked on the project at all levels were people of color, and 80% of the people who worked on the project were women. And just making that decision to be a little bit of the solution and not part of the problem, it wasn't hard. It really wasn't hard. It was just asking one more person than you normally ask to get a recommendation for somebody to fill a certain role, and trying just a little bit harder. It wasn't a lot harder. It was just an extra phone call. So it was, and ultimately it created this great spirit of collaboration and teamwork on the set. It was 8 really hard days, but it was just a community. It was, our set looked like the city we were shooting in. We shot in Brooklyn. It looked like the America we wanted to bring about. When you make art, you're bringing about a new world. And so I'm really proud of that. I will never do it another way. Any project I ever work on will represent the world I want to dream into being. And learning that we could do that we could just make a little effort and do that. I can't unlearn that, and I don't want to unlearn that. It was really great.
Eloquently said. Yeah, and I think we probably all had that experience. So once you make a film with somebody, it's almost like their family. It's almost like you've been in a romantic relationship with them. For the rest of your days, you will feel this sense of connection with the people that you've worked with, and always kind of have a love for them because of what the war you went through together, or the that shared purpose that you had to make something beautiful. Frank.
Oh yes, this is hard for me to answer because I feel like I learned a lot on this film, and yet I still have so much to learn. But I guess the way I might try to answer this is to talk about the pandemic and how this event has really forced us to reconsider what we were all up to before the pandemic. There's a time before the pandemic and there's a time after the pandemic, and I'm glad that we got to make this version of the film, even though we wanted to make a feature and we didn't have enough money, but we just did it anyway. And if I had chose to do nothing as opposed to doing this, I'm glad we did this. And what I did learn was more of what I had been learning, just the power of collaboration, and how what you bring plus what your collaborators bring results in a third thing, which is greater than either of the original plans that either you or your collaborators had. So that's, and I also learned that you're never happy with the film. You're always finding things that, I wish I thought of this. You're always thinking of better ideas, and I think I have a feeling that might never go away. But if it does, then maybe when I'm 75, hopefully, or 80 or 90 or 100, then I can retire once I make one that's okay, when I don't have better ideas after. But until then, I'll keep trying.
Right. There's that argument that you never really finish. You just sort of abandon it at some point. Yeah, really, really great insights. Thank you to all of you for taking the trouble to talk with me today, and for sharing your film with the Chicago Southland International Film Festival. Take great care and have a wonderful Sunday.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dan.
All right.
Thanks, Frank. Bye.